Let's walk the talk.
702.
Yeah, like I was saying that the South Africa's public service is once again under scrutiny, not only because of allegations of misconduct in various departments, but because of a growing pattern. Officials seem to resign, and they seem to resign before disciplinary processes can run their full course. And most recently, just as some form of example, attention has to be turned to the Department of Social Department, where a chief of staff recently resigned amid mounting controversy and scrutiny. And while resignations can sometimes be framed as taking accountability, because we often ask ourselves in the media, why does he not resign as such? They also raise a critical question. Does stepping down bring closure, or does it effectively halt internal disciplinary processes before findings can be made? 9 after 11. Professor Somadoda Fikeni joins us right now. Prof, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for making time to spend some insights with us. I hope you're well.
I'm fine. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that you invite us to share some of the issues in the public service, because I believe that the public ought to know and be engaged on some of these issues as we are waiting for the budget speech. Should we have a capable, ethical state, I bet my last cent you wouldn't have the inefficiencies that lead us to have such a deficit and sometimes expenditure that is misdirected if you had that capacity of the state and it had the integrity.
Resigning before a disciplinary hearing or its outcomes, is it a form of escapade or accountability, Prof?
There are two types of this. There was a time when people were being chased even when they had nothing and cooked up charges because they want that person who has been an obstruction to their corruption to be out of the system. Some are suspended, no charges, and so forth. So some people will then realize that the system is rigged in many ways and resign, because it becomes very difficult to be re-employed when you have that thing which says you were actually fired and you may not even recover some of your pensions. But a majority of cases, you have people who have done wrong and they realize that I have to jump the ship and avoid accountability so that I reappear in another job, refurbished, and start again, sometimes do the same thing again.
And from your office perspective, how prevalent is this phenomena?
It is quite prevalent. In fact, the problem is that the disciplinary cases are so decentralized. They take place in different departments, different provinces, and we do not have a centralized data system. But right now we are working towards having that kind of an integrated data and biometric systems that feed into that data, so that an employee who is facing charges, serious charges for that matter, and an employee who then is suspended or resigns before the verdict of a disciplinary, that data should still capture the information. Right now, the reform of the Z83 towards people declaring themselves, have you been suspended? Have you faced disciplinary? It's a step in the right direction, but an integrated biometric system which simply records those. And in fact, whenever you want to open the ID of that person or their parcel number, it will tell that this person has gone through the following. Then we won't have the kinds of problems that we have, where people avoid accountability, get all their monies, their pensions, and then proceed to another province, to another department to do wrong.
And just for purposes of clarity, as a communication student, I always love speaking clearly. The Z83 is the application form generally for the public
application form for government.
For
yes.
government, yes. In case,
Yes.
yeah, Prof, under current public service regulations, does resignation, departure automatically terminate disciplinary jurisdiction?
Once the person has resigned, you no longer have the jurisdiction over that person. Only the courts of law and all other expensive, complicated processes. But once they are no longer within your employment, a different regime of laws. You can't apply, for example, Public Service, Act in the case of a person who has left that particular department or that particular government.
How then can if at all possible, the disciplinary hearing or some movements towards the disciplinary hearing somehow involve a post-employ situation where the person can be held to account even post leaving the current office? And I'm trying to, perhaps it doesn't even exist at all, but can you intertwine the civil or criminal system to that in order for them not to escape accountability eventually?
You can, even though it is expensive and difficult once the person is no longer within your ambit.
Yeah.
That is why the Public Service Commission has been saying that in the event of serious charges and the person simply disappears, docking their last payments or the pensions in order to verify if there is nothing owed to government or to the department or organization concerned, might be one such deterrent. Of course, the others which are barely applied is simply reference to the next employer. Some of the employers simply ask you to tell them who are the 2 or 3 referees instead of going back to your original workplace, which by law ought to disclose if there were any disciplinary processes against the person concerned.
Can a registry of sorts work of officials who resign whilst facing misconduct allegations?
Certainly, when I was talking about this integrated data, it was actually a register wherein people disciplined, found guilty, or they faced disciplinary action and then left before time, those would be recorded. Even if the person is not found guilty, it is always important to have a record so that in future people can peruse and check if the process itself lacked integrity and therefore they let the person go out or they give a nominal sentence to a person when in fact the case was serious. All those things are there to be improved because currently we do not have that. We have serious fragmentation in the process. And I have come to believe that we have very complicated regulatory framework, and it is not speaking to each other if you are in this province, in that department, and so forth. That's why people reappear in many positions. And there was a case of a person who was an HOD, left this province under the cloud, went into the next province under the cloud, and reappear as a DG. And we have this very ignoble case of a country where you fail upwards.
Only in the way that you could put it, Prof. I could also give you some of your famous quotes from your days as a political analyst, but it will dissuade us from the journey we are traversing now. 17 minutes after 11 o'clock, Professor Somadoda Fikeni is my guest. He's Commissioner of Public Service Commission. We're coming back with him shortly, as I would want us to delve on other issues. We've touched on the registry. What about packages? What about pensions that can be docked?
702.
Let's walk the talk on 92.7
and 106 FM.
It's 20 minutes after 11 o'clock. Welcome back. Thabo in for Clement. We're together till 12. In this segment, we are looking at the phenomena of dealing with the trend that says of people who resign, or employees, government employees who resign before a disciplinary process is instituted against them, and they conveniently disappear and say thank you, but this is the end of the road for us. Is it some form of escapade, or is it accountability, wherein you're saying perhaps that's their way of admitting that they are wrong, or are they running away from being held to account? Professor Somadoda Fikeni is Commissioner of Public Service Commission. He joins us now to help us and guide us along this very interesting topic. Prof, maybe just to throw the spanner in the works, some people may resign because they do not have the emotional aptitude or the psychological acumen to go through a very tedious disciplinary hearing, and these hearings can actually even affect your personal life. And I'm just wondering, how do we balance the rights of individuals and also making sure that we adhere to somehow regulations in a workplace and not use one against the other?
As I started exactly with that point, I was mindful of the fact that we are now facing thousands of people who have been on long-term suspension beyond what regulation requires. And some of them, no disciplinary action has ever taken place. And in the extreme situation, it was 12 years with full pay, 8 years. In such instances, you realize that some people are being forced out of the system. It has nothing to do with administrative justice of a disciplinary process. So that balance, the laws are already there. It's a matter of the integrity of people who are applying those. If you start, as the regulation from the Department of Public Service and Administration says, you can only suspend a person if you felt that their presence would affect your investigation. It's not the beginning of a sentence. And you can also suspend a person for no more than 60 days unless the chairperson of a disciplinary. But in all these cases, you realize that nothing of that has been taking place in the majority of these cases. So it comes to your point to say, in some instances, some people genuinely, and they can explain this, and sometimes in interviews we see such things, and we see where a person was just being victimized, and they can put their case and they can present the documentation, and in such cases it should not prejudice them from getting into the next job because it was the toxicity in their environment rather than them doing the wrong thing.
I'd like us to look at pensions, and you did allude to it earlier on. But before I do that, maybe let me just bring in one of our listeners who wanted to comment on that. Feel free to do the same on 011-883-0702. That's where you can give us a call and we can engage with your questions. Alternatively, you can send a voice note to 072-702-1702. There was one text message that came through that says that the system offers them resignations. The system offers them resignations. That's why they would find it convenient to leave. As I'm battling to get my voice notes that are coming through, I see some of them are, but let me try to get that right. But let's go back to Professor Somadoda Fikeni. Prof, you spoke and you alluded to the issue of pensions a little bit earlier on. Could that be somehow punitive? Unjustifiably so, especially given that the process wouldn't have been complete as yet and a guilty verdict would not have been established, and them leaving and having to then have their pensions docked without due process. I think that also spits in the face of rule of law.
Yes and no. It always depends on the case. Here is a person who has stolen computers in an organization, and the person has admitted guilt during the hearing. When they realize that now they are about to receive the sentence, then suddenly they are running off. In such instances, you can go to court and defend the case as to why you dock this salary in order to recover, if that was one of the verdicts of the disciplinary process. So it would not be a blunt instrument that is used against every other person, but there are specific cases where a person has stolen or taken money and so forth. It is for that reason, even outside now public service, you have the preservation order to say we are not taking it away, but we want this particular process to run its course to see if there would be no lien against that pension in order to extract from it.
25 after 11, 072 702 1702.
Hi, Thabo and the team. My question to the Prof is, why can't they attach the disciplinary hearing to their pension fund by saying that we will not approve your pension fund until you complete your hearing? I think that is simple. Prof. David.
Prof, I think you've touched on that a bit, but I don't know if you want to add anything.
By law, you can't say we are holding you hostage and so forth in terms of you wanting to resign. We say you can't resign, but you can have justifiable grounds if you want to recover your resources, as I said, to say that we will not release the pension immediately. And we still make a commitment that should you be found not to have anything to pay or to recover, then your pensions will be given to you. But that process too should be acted on with speed. Because remember, some people may have their houses repossessed and other things only to find that the person was not guilty. So you can't then use it in a normal court process. It has to be expedited so that a person doesn't suffer prejudice.
Should the departments be required to somehow publicly disclose the status of disciplinary matters when senior officials resign, Prof?
Well, to me, I would not see anything problematic in that because even in the annual reports to Parliament and other accounting entities, that information ought to be made, public. Yeah. There is no problem. It may just be the details of the person and the inner, settings of that particular disciplinary, because at times it involves personal information, it involves other people as well. But the outcome, yes.
As we put a ribbon around this box that we have just created, Prof, before we say goodbye, is this matter somehow consuming you in your office, and are you generally fixated with coming with a solution, particularly as a Commissioner of Public Service Commission, around this matter, as it also spills out to ordinary members of the public when they are watching people who are supposed to be accounting, leaving without accounting, leaving without due process being followed, and they emerge elsewhere. Is this one of your KPIs?
It is, because as Chapter 10, which creates the Public Service Commission, instructs us to make sure that there is an effective and efficient public service. So career incidents of this nature are at the core of the PSC. However, they are dealt with in a decentralized manner. One, the Department of Public Service and Administration issue regulations. And two, departments in provinces, in national and everywhere else, then are the ones who manage those career incidents, disciplinary consequence management, and so forth. They are only escalated to the Public Service Commission when a person feels that I have not been favored with a fair process within the department. However, at a policy level, it is something we're raising all the time, and it's not the only one, like those long suspensions with full pay. And this one of people leaving, just the whole discipline management process, it has many weaknesses, and which cause the government not to be optimally functional.
Much appreciated, Professor Somadoda Fikeni, Commissioner of Public Service Commission.